This is the largest mega-project of its kind anywhere in Europe. What's now a big muddy trench is set to become a critical new trade route, connecting France to Belgium, the Netherlands, and beyond. But it's not just a new road or railway, this is a canal, and a seriously big one. It'll have super deep locks so extraordinary they're expected to become tourist attractions. Dozens of bridges that will allow huge boats to pass under and over existing infrastructure. And a complex design that's pushing engineering and technology to the absolute limit.
And it's all being built in an area with an astonishing past, including the setting for one of the deadliest battles in history.
The canals of Europe. They're great for a bit of scenery, but are they actually still, useful for anything? Well, sure, if you wanted to take a boat tour of Amsterdam, glide under the bridges of Bruges, or just skim a few stones to pass the time, then the answer would be yes. But is that it?
Well, no. Not even close.
Because this continent's inland waterways, as they're also known, remain one of its most important infrastructure networks. In 2024, almost 500 million tonnes of goods were transported across the EU via these systems, and that number has been increasing. Most of the activity takes place in just 3 countries: the Netherlands, Germany, and Belgium. It's hardly surprising when they're covered in canals that join up with some of Europe's biggest ports like Rotterdam, Antwerp, and Hamburg. But don't forget about France. It has 8,500 kilometres of navigable waterways, making it the largest network of any European country. The trouble is, they don't connect very well with those other nations. There is one major route that sort of brings them together, the Canal du Nord, which runs from the north of France down to the Seine basin. Yes, that Seine.
It took more than half a century to build. I know what you're thinking. Why on earth did it take that long? Truth is, they've got a pretty legitimate excuse.
And with a lot of the fighting on both occasions taking place in this very region, we'll give them a pass. But unfortunately, after all that time, it started to become obsolete very quickly.
Alors ce canal du Nord, lui, c'est un canal assez ancien là, qui a été commencé dans les années 1900, achevé en 1965. Donc, alors ce canal du Nord est un canal qui aujourd'hui ne permet pas la navigation des grands bateaux et donc ne permet pas la navigation de la majeure partie de la flotte européenne.
Basically, it's not suitable for big modern barges, and even for the ones that do fit, it's often a bit of a tight squeeze. So France is now having another go with a new canal that's going to do an awful lot more than just replace its earlier effort. In fact, you could say this new canal is a real tour de force, or the crème de la crème of canals, if you will. I'll stop there.
With a 107-kilometre length and 54-metre width, the Seine-Nord Europe Canal is considerably longer and wider than its predecessor. It'll be suitable for vessels over 7 times larger than what the Canal du Nord can manage, up to 4,500 tonnes in weight. It's all set to cost €7.3 billion, and half of that is EU funding. The rest is coming from the French government and the various regions and departments that the canal will pass through, from Oise in the south to Nord in the north. Now, if you're not familiar with France, it's split into 13 metropolitan regions, and within those are 96 departments.
Now, we could go into the divisions below that and start talking about arrondissements, cantons, and communes. But to be honest, it's all super complicated and would end up making this video like 3 times longer than it needs to be, so sorry, it ain't happening today.
This critical new waterway is set to seriously boost trade, speed up navigation, and reduce pressure on other modes of transport, and right across Europe, not just in France. That's due to its connectivity with those European neighbours via what's called the Seine-Escaut River Link.
Donc la liaison Seine-Escaut, c'est liaison européenne qui va permettre d'aménager à grand gabarit les voies navigables, tant en France qu'en Belgique, en Flandre et en Wallonie.
It's what makes it a crucial component of the EU's Trans-European Transport Network, which, to remind you, is that huge interconnected system of railways, roads, ports, and, obviously, canals spread all over the member states. 2013 is when the EU gave its consent to the plan, and 3 years later a company was set up to oversee the project, the Société du Canal Seine-Nord Europe, or SCSNE for short.
Another 3 years passed before the finances were agreed between the EU, the French government, and various local authorities. And then finally, in 2022, everything was set up and ready to go, ready for the real work to begin. So with that in mind, let's move on to the project's raison d'etre. Oh, that one didn't land either. I'm really sorry, I will stop doing this now, we're just going to move on. Okay, as the actress once said to the bishop, let's get into the engineering. Now, you might think, perhaps understandably, that constructing a new canal is just about digging a big long trench and filling it with water.
That's kind of how it appears in this drone footage of the construction site taken in late 2025. But surprise, surprise, there's actually a lot more to it than that. Like with most canals, there are going to be large locks placed at numerous points, and there are 7 on the Seine-Nord Europe route. These allow boats to travel through areas of varying terrain and water levels. 2 of the locks will have drops of more than 25 metres, making them the deepest ever built in Europe, including this one, which doesn't just have an extreme depth, it's 12.5 metres wide and 197 metres long. These giant gateways have to offer unusually high levels of performance. What that means is boats are going to be able to pass through them quickly despite their immense size. Lockage times, how long it takes the system to empty or fill, can't exceed 15 minutes. So, in order to get water quickly in and out while limiting the environmental impact, a set of cascading basins is going to be built off to the side. They'll be connected to the lock chamber, where the boats sit, via a series of pumps and culverts, allowing water to be recycled.
Le projet comporte un bassin réservoir, et donc ce bassin réservoir est rempli pendant l'hiver. Et il sert après à l'alimentation du canal pendant l'été, au moment où l'eau est moins disponible.
Great, but these locks are the sort of thing you don't want to build without knowing how they're going to work first, which is why they're being designed using a combination of digital technology and detailed physical models. Building scaled-down versions means the project team can optimize complex components before they're made for real. Like the perforated floor slab, for example. This sits between the lock chamber and the dissipation chamber underneath, managing the flow of water between them. They can also test factors like flow rates, employ sensors to measure various forces, and experiment with the valves that control the operating system. But it's the virtual model created for this canal that is arguably even more impressive. Egis, the main contractor, had to find a way for hundreds of people to access and manage more than a terabyte of data. What they needed was a connected data environment to serve as a digital backbone for the entire project. That would allow people from various departments to collaborate and visualize what was going on in real time.
The freedom model is very easy to understand the project. So it's very important for this project to manage the beam and to manage the 3D model and to manage the data, because it's the first time to have the 250 person to collaborate inside.
By using Bentley's ProjectWise system as a common data environment, the team was able to carry out digital design reviews and detect clashes or inconsistencies very easily. It's been so successful that Egis has now added several modelling applications from the company to its workflow.
When we start with this project, we start with ProjectWise, and now it's the Bentley infrastructure. We work with microstation, we work with open road. It's very interesting to check for the class detection and to follow the issue inside the Bentley infrastructure cloud.
Overall, this way of working improved productivity by over 40%, while the time it took to generate the models was reduced by over 60%. It meant that more time could be spent on tasks like figuring out how to make this mega build as beneficial as possible to the French population and not an eyesore. The locks are going to be so big, they're going to be pretty noticeable additions to the landscape.
But they'll be immense feats of engineering in their own right, which is why SNEC plans to make them a tourist magnet. It might sound like an unusual attraction, but tell me, honestly, which of you hasn't stopped next to a canal lock to watch a boat going through? It is really fascinating stuff. It's mesmerising to watch, especially for people who like engineering. So when the locks on the new Seine-Nord Europe are going to be some of the most advanced locks ever constructed, I totally get it. Sign me up now. Where's the ticket link?
Incredibly, we've only just begun describing the scale of the challenge presented by this project. Because it's being built through a territory full of existing transport infrastructure, planners have had to include 62 road and rail crossings into their design. Unlike the locks, which are just beginning construction, several of the bridges which would take traffic over the canal have already been completed, including one that was placed across an existing canal that's set to become part of Seine-Nord Europe, installed using a pretty clever technique. To start with, the metal frame was assembled on the south bank. This was then placed on temporary supports before a system of cables, pulleys and winches carefully launched the structure over the water. Once in its final position, it could dock on the permanent supports and wait for the 20-ton prefabricated concrete deck slabs to arrive by boat. In fact, using the current waterways to build the new waterway is a big part of the construction strategy. A total of 10 construction quays will ensure that as much material as possible is transported off-road, helping to reduce carbon emissions. The one you see here, built off to the side of the Canal de la Seine, required a serious construction procedure of its own. After clearing and excavating a large space on the bank, a watertight wall was created using sheet piles driven into the soil and concrete capping beams. The surface is later topped with asphalt, like in this other example. It allows vehicles to pick up material from the boats and carry it a short distance to one of the main sites.
So there's a lot going on, but the biggest section of all is yet to get underway, the Pont Canal de la Somme.
It's an enormous viaduct that will take the waterway over the infrastructure that's already there rather than under it. Stretching for 1.3 kilometres, it'll be the longest canal viaduct in Europe.
On a choisi la réalisation d'un pont-canal pour diverses raisons. La première raison, c'est d'abord, bien entendu, de permettre l'écoulement hydraulique de la Somme, donc bien entendu. La deuxième raison, c'était principalement des raisons environnementales, puisqu'on traverse à cet endroit-là donc une zone Natura 2000, une zone donc de haute valeur environnementale. Et donc la solution du pont-canal était une solution qui présentait le moins d'impact sur l'environnement. Et enfin, donc la troisième raison, c'est également une raison technique, puisqu'on est situé dans des zones humides, dans des zones compressibles.
As Benoit said, reducing the canal's footprint as it crosses the Somme Valley makes sense, as this region is known for its rich ecology. Of course, it's also synonymous with what happened here more than a century ago. The Battle of the Somme. The bodies of around 100,000 soldiers who died on the western front of World War I are still missing. That's why SNEC has been working with the Commonwealth War Graves Commission on a series of exploratory operations. It ensures that remains are discovered in advance and given the burial they deserve in an expanded cemetery nearby. Since its very beginning, the project has been recognised as Europe's largest preventative archaeological initiative, unearthing discoveries going back to the Paleolithic era. Another way the construction is being compensated for is by dedicating 1,200 hectares of land to improving biodiversity. There are going to be wildlife crossings, around 60 sites transformed into wetlands and ponds, and new trees planted. SNEC even claims that some species have already returned to the area since construction began.
As for when it's all due to finish, well, 2032 is the aim, giving France adequate access to that North European network at long last. At the same time, the wider continent will have forged closer ties with what is the EU's second largest economy, and all through a form of infrastructure that remains pretty underappreciated. While railways, airports and base tunnels do get a lot of the headlines and attention in the world of big transport, the completion of this project really could be a watershed moment. This video was sponsored by Bentley Systems. You can see how Bentley Systems can help transform your next project at the link below. And as always guys, if you enjoyed this video and you want to get more from the definitive video channel for construction, make sure you're subscribed to the B1M.